These are the HEKTOR series of cinema lenses designed for modern full-frame mirrorless cameras. It's a series of 6 lenses that take inspiration from the 30s and 40s and marry that to modern conveniences and coatings for a type of lens that just isn't available on the market. What makes these lenses so unique is that when they were being designed by the team at Leitz HEKTOR, they went through the archive to see what kind of visual signatures they had. They took that and married it to a manufacturing style that was prominent in the 70s and 80s, where they only used spherical lens elements. And you take that, combine that with modern technologies and coatings and their knowledge of lens manufacturing, and you have sort of this unique product that puts quality first while also introducing character in your results. The HEKTOR name, it's inspired by and derived from the screw mount lenses in the past by the same name. And there's a few points of inspiration, but the main one being at the time, those HEKTOR lenses were very small and also provided a very wide aperture. And that's what you see here on these modern HEKTOR cinema lenses. They are all designed with a t-stop of 2.1. And if you are trying to compare them to an f-stop, that's roughly 1.8. There are 6 lenses in the series: 18, 25, 35, 50, 73, and 100. That 73 is really special because it is inspired by a very similar lens from that same name in the past, the 73 f1.9. Before we jump into the look of these lenses, let me talk a little bit more about the design. These lenses, all 6 of them, they are matched with their iris ring and their focus ring, which makes it very easy to swap in video production environments. They all, save for the 18mm, have a 77mm filter thread size. So you have access to high-end filters, you can throw on a matte box, but for independent storytellers, you can use prosumer and consumer filter threads pretty easily with these lenses. Those of you that are using M-mount lenses, you'll appreciate that the focus ring operates in the same direction. So you can use this very similar to your range focusing on an M lens. What differentiates this from M lenses though, is that there is no 6-bit coding on the back of the lens mount. So when you throw this on your SL camera, you'll have to go in and choose the right profile so you have that in your metadata. What is special about these lenses is that they have user interchangeable mounts. You can pick up additional mounts, be it RF, Z, or FE, and you can swap them yourself. That makes them incredibly versatile, especially for independent storytellers that might have their own solution but might be renting other solutions for different projects. All these lenses, they have a 120-degree focus throw, which makes them very easy to pull and rack focus, going from near to infinity. What I appreciate most is that in this kind of environment where we're trying to get a lot of the landscape, I can anticipate, pull it to infinity, lock the aperture where it needs to be, and get the shot that I'm looking for. And on that note, these are lenses that are great for both filmmaking and photography. Again, they're not matching a look from the past. They're not trying to replicate a lens that was made before. They draw inspiration from all types of lenses for a very unique look. Something that gives you clean sharpness, not technical and sterile sharpness. I'm just talking about clean, pleasant sharpness at the focus plane, things that look natural, not overly sharp. But when you go to those out of focus areas, it has very unique character, and especially across the different focal lengths. It's something that I'm really enjoying for the photography. Like I mentioned earlier, there are 6 lenses in the HEKTOR series: 18, 25, 35, 50, 73, and 100. They all have a t-stop of 2.1. And for those that are unfamiliar, f-stops measure how much light is theoretically entering the lens into your sensor, whereas t-stops are an actual measurement of how much light is reaching your sensor or your film. And at T2.1, these are really fast lenses. What I appreciate about these lenses is that you can focus really closely. I mean, on the wide side, you can focus well under a meter. And with an image circle of 47.8 millimeters, there's more than enough room to cover a full frame sensor. On the note of full frame, let's talk about mounts, because what's special about these HEKTOR lenses is that they feature user interchangeable mounts. And the ability to change them in the field is what makes them special. It only takes a few minutes, 5 screws from what I remember, and here in our expedition, we've been able to do that very easily. I should also mention that this being cinema lenses, they are completely manual focus. I found that the iris ring, or the aperture ring for some folks, has a good amount of resistance to it, whereas the focus ring, it has a little bit more give to it, making it easy to pull and rack focus. It's especially useful, I found, when it comes to photography, to quickly move from infinity to near focus. For those of you that are looking to use these lenses on SL bodies or other L mount cinema options, it should be noted that these lenses don't have any 6-bit coding. So when you mount it onto your camera's not going to know what lens is on it. To remedy this, you'll have to go into your camera settings, onto your lens profile, and manually select the focal length that you're using. This will open up the metadata, but also allow you to take advantage of image stabilization. All of these lenses are under 2 pounds, except for the 100mm. That's just a touch over. What's unique about the lenses, from 25 to 100, they have an 80mm diameter and a 77mm filter thread size, which means that you can use prosumer filter options really easily like we are here. The 18mm, while it has the same diameter, it has curvature on the front element. So you're gonna have to find a different ND or variable diffusion option for that lens specifically. Speaking of front elements, what I've been told by the Leitz team is that they are designed to be easily serviced and replaced. And the rear element group, again, from what I'm told, that is designed to be replaced without requiring realignment. Looking at these lenses, I mean, you can tell they are incredibly compact. When you throw it on an SL body, it's not unlike using a Noctilux lens. From 18 to 73, they're shorter than a Coke can. The 100mm is just a little bit taller, but they have the focus and iris rings in the exact same position. So if you're using them in a complex rig, they're all still gonna line up if you have a fizz system that's controlling these two rings. I think what I appreciated most, especially on this expedition, is that whether we were operating them handheld in Sissamute or going to Disco Bay and having a gimbal setup, it's a lens that balanced easily, that felt natural to use, that you can use handheld, that you can rely on. And again, especially in those 1 or 2 person operating environments, it performed extremely well. What will make these lenses attractive for filmmakers and even photographers is that you have all the sharpness you'd want from a lens at the plane of focus, and a lot of character and soul in the out of focus area, and not in a unpredictable, funky kind of way, in a way that you can wield even wide open. One of the first things you'll notice is that when you're shooting into a beam of light, or even if it's slightly off axis, is you'll get these shower flares that come through, and they don't completely wash out your image. They seem very controlled, and the beams are quite predictable. And on top of this, depending on the conditions that you're in, you'll even get these rainbow patterns that come through that can add to your story if that's what you're looking for. The overall bokeh on these lenses when you're wide open is rich, it's creamy, there's a dramatic fall off from the plane of focus to the out of focus area. It's really exaggerated, and that's something that I've been leaning into, especially with something like the 73 T2.1. That's something that makes for an incredible portrait lens, or something that you want to capture details with. When you look through these lenses in certain conditions, when there's a lot of texture and greenery especially, you'll notice the Petzval effect, this swirling effect that's very unique to the HEKTOR line. And when it comes to color and control, it's all really good as well. There's a lot of control with this, and under neutral circumstances, there's probably a hint of warmth. It's not something that's gonna really shift the overall look, but just something to take into mind when you're using these lenses. For my filmmaking, I have a set of contact Zeiss lenses that I've modded. I have some budget anamorphic options, and I have some modern M Summilux lenses that I adapt. You know, all of them, they serve a different purpose, but I've always had this need for something that could be as sharp as I need it to be to tell the story, would have some character and soul, but it wouldn't be unpredictable, it wouldn't be unwieldy when I want to shoot wide open, and especially when there's a lot of light sources happening. And for some reason, this comes along at just the perfect time in my filmmaking journey to provide that. So for those people that are in production houses or rental houses, yes, this is going to be very popular for them. But for those independent storytellers, maybe those 1 or 2 person crews, this is going to provide some real value and a lot of control in select storytelling environments. To understand this brand new optical formula a little bit further, I reached out to a friend of mine, Dale Sood. Dale is a director and cinematographer based in Toronto. Though he'd never admit it, he's also a remarkable photographer. As a member of the Canadian Society of Cinematographers, he knows a thing or two about testing cinema optics for important productions.
These are all tests that you can do with resources that you have. Testing lenses doesn't require some fancy facility with fancy equipment, because those things are just for servicing lenses. But if you really care about the qualities of your lens that's going to communicate to an audience, you probably already have almost everything that you need to be able to do that. Because what you're using is your eye, and your eye is analyzing the data. So you don't need collimators, you don't need any of this stuff. Projectors, they're not really necessary. What's necessary is what shows up on the screen. If you don't see it on the screen, it's unnecessary. The test that we're really looking for today is looking at all the major aberrations that exist within the lens. Where does it get soft? Where do we see chromatic aberration? Where do we see things like coma? Anywhere the image distorts outside of anything that we would consider normal. Something that aberrates is not necessarily bad. It just means that it has a different quality than the baseline. And we want to use that quality to our advantage, or we want to remove that and say that lens isn't right for our job because it has these qualities. But there's no bad or good. They're just a variance of quality. I would test every single lens at every single T-stop, but that takes a lot of time, and what you'll discover is oftentimes not that relevant. Like the differences will be minute. Where you'll really discover things is like, they say 8 is kind of like the best part of the lens, but I go to like 5, 6, because I'm like, nobody's shooting at 8, right? 5, 6 is where you want to see how much does it clean up at 5, 6. Because
that's what generally in my notes, I'm like, wide open, 4 or 5, 6, and 8. Those are sort of like the 3 that like
exactly
you're using to tell a story.
Like Dale mentioned earlier, the test that we did here today was to get this general understanding of how these lenses performed and how they differ from one to the next. I'll leave a link down below for some higher resolution samples. The first test was to look at focusing, and we looked at T2.1 and T5.6. The 18mm has really good focus at the center, and when you go to the corners, it becomes very soft. There's also a lot of vignetting at T2.1. When you stop down to 5.6, there's a significant improvement to sharpness at the center and the edges. And there's a massive improvement when it comes to vignetting. You'll also notice with the 18mm, there's quite a bit of distortion, and excuse the shadow here from our camera rig. The 25mm at T2.1 has just as good center sharpness, maybe a bit more softness in the corners though, and it almost looks like an astigmatism, but I can't quite say that, at least with the testing that we did. There is this vignette when it's wide open, and when you stop down to 5.6, as you would have guessed, there's a massive leap in corner sharpness and noticeably better improvement around vignetting. From the 35mm HEKTOR lens and beyond, you'll notice that not only is center sharpness really good, but corner sharpness is also legible. When you're wide open, you'll notice that the vignettes are not as pronounced as the 18 or the 25. When you stop down to 5.6, as you would have guessed, all of this improves across the board. This behavior repeats with the 50, the 73, and the 100, and this shouldn't be too much of a surprise because we're dealing with tighter and tighter focal lengths. The next test was designed around looking at bokeh, field curvature, and even some aberrations, trying to understand a little bit more of the character with these lenses. We set up these LED strips in as straight a line as possible, would focus on them, and then rack between infinity and near focusing. With the 18, you'll notice this curve that's really pronounced. As we move to infinity, you'll see that there's these angel wings that start to appear in the bokeh toward the edges. When you go to near focus, you notice that there's more of this cat's eye shape. With the 25, there's a more prominent angel wing pattern that's happening here. And when you go to infinity, it becomes even more pronounced. Moving to near focus, you have more of this oblong kind of shape that takes place. What's interesting is that these shapes and patterns, they differ from lens to lens. The 35 and 50 have more of this triangle shape to them at focus and infinity. And when you go to near focus, it's more of this cat's eye shape that you see. And here you'll also notice this soap bubble edges, where the edges are just slightly harder on these bokeh balls that are appearing. With the 73 and 100, there seems to be more of a UFO shape to them, if I had to describe it. And again, you see these really prominent cat's eye at near focus. With these focal lengths, you'll also notice some of these impurities that appear, and that's likely the lens having some dust on the front or back element.
The worst flare test that you can do is a flashlight or a cell phone into the lens, because you're just not getting enough information It's a tiny bit of information, and the spot is so small. You're really not exploiting all of the aspects of a flare. And so the only true, real way to get the best flare test possible is to get a small Fresnel. Ideally, you want a tungsten Fresnel, like a little RE 150 or 300. But I've got a nanolite LED here. The reason you want like tungsten, again, is because LED, although these are non-flicker, but like certain things can flicker, and you're always changing your shutter angle. It's just kind of a nice pure light as well. But this works fine. Like for 99.9% of things, this is just fine. And this light is going to be static. And instead of moving the light, we move the lens. Because that's how flares work. Is it's not, I do this and I can see all the flares. No. As you're filming with your camera, you're turning, right? Yeah. Now the light is coming from a different angle, right? It's not just in front doing this. It's actually coming around the side. And so it's you relative to the light. It's not the light relative to you unless you've got some light gizmo that's moving around. It's you relative to the light. So you need to see what that lens does with you relative to the light. And that's why this is so important. Not quite done yet. And this will only ever be wide open. The flares won't change much. What will happen is flares are relative to exposure. Right. So as your exposure goes down, you start eliminating those flares. Right. The reason we're doing it wide open is we want to see every single flare possible. We know that it'll only ever get better as we stop down, but this is going to expose all of them, right? So the idea is that we are now changing our lens relative to the light. Right. And so we want to go all the way 180 degrees to see when the flares stop, right? On a wider lens, they're going to likely be more apparent because it's seeing a lot more, right? That angle of view is greater. But I've seen like really, really good high quality wide lenses that the flares stop pretty quickly, even though it's a wide angle lens. It just depends on the coatings and a lot of different things. With these, I expect, being that they're character lenses, we're going to see a lot of them. So we want to know where the flares stop, and in that flare journey, all the different flares that we see along the way. You know, it's like we're going on a journey and we're going to meet a bunch of different flares as we go, as we turn. So we'll roll on this. Okay. I'll demonstrate first. So this is 18 mil, 2-1 wide open, as we know. We always start in the center.
Right now, are you pulling focus?
Nope. Okay. Yeah. So we want to focus on the element itself, on the on the fixture. There we go. Okay. Okay. So now this is really rad. This is a really cool lens. A lot of rainbow. I haven't seen this much rainbow. That's the quality of a really old lens. Oh my God, that is wild. So it stops here. So I'm not really seeing. Oh, there's another one. There's a spot flare there, and then we're out. Spot flare. I thought I saw another one there, but I think my eyes are. And then we got spot flare. Then we've got this veiling flare. That's and then we've got the rainbow flares here. Spot, spot, spot. There's a flare. What I really like about this is I love this. You see that that rotation of the rainbow flare, which is really, really nice. I'm not seeing any. Yeah, it's really nice. I'm not seeing any mechanical flare, and the mechanical flare happens just as the point source is just out of frame. You'll see this like little like burst as it go, and I'm not seeing it here because it doesn't really happen on wide lenses. Like this is, to me, this is space, right? This is, Kubrick wouldn't necessarily use lenses like this, but this is the idea of like solar flares and like dream sequences. Like that's where this world is, and it's very few lenses do this like for reason. Yeah. Like they want to limit their application. They want to correct that out. And then the veiling flare is just all this white stuff, right? So when I put a person in the shot, how much does the veil obscure the details of that person, right? It lowers the contrast. Like there's no solid black here. I don't get solid black until I'm like kind of there, you know, relatively speaking to exposure. So a good test will include a studio test where you'll have somebody sit here after, and you'll do like a light on them plus this behind them, and you'll get a sense of like how much does it obscure, and you'll do it at wide open and at 5.6, right? But we can tell already quite a lot just from this.
By far, the most fun test had to be the flare test. It's a chance for us to really look at all this fun character that these lenses introduce. These HEKTOR lenses, they all seem to be speaking the same language, but just seem to have these different dialects where each one flares a little bit differently. There are some things you can look out for, but how they render feels very unique.
No real rainbow flares. A little bit.
Ooh.
This is that. That's your mechanical flare right there. It just bursts and then it goes away. Boom, gone.
Again, you can visit the link down below to view these images in a little bit more detail to see what these flares really look like. But I think the special thing for me was understanding the different kinds of flares that are available with these HEKTOR lenses and to which degree they show up. Knowing that, understanding that, and practicing it in the field, well, it starts to become a powerful storytelling feature. We can decide if we want more of these veiling, dreamy flares, or if we want something that's a little bit more controlled, or perhaps we want this sunburst and these rainbow tones to come through. When you know how these lenses perform relative to a light source, you can use that to drive your story with more impact.
And this rainbow flare is fucking wicked. That is awesome. Oh my god, that looks like the 1960s. That is fantastic. And then in doing this test at different apertures, will tell you where does it really start to eliminate. You know? And then and it's also somewhat aperture independent because it's based on coatings.
Right.
But as we stop down, we kind of wrangle the light in more into the center, and so we get less of the craziness.
Yeah.
But also, as the scene gets darker, we just darken it out. We just crush it into the shadows.
Right.
It's a big difference from the 73 where you sort of had a lot of those spot flares coming like pyramid. And this one's just sort of like really just
A lot of veiling.
yeah.
Boom.
Wow.
Oh, that's kind of neat.
Oh, look at that. There's like this.
Yeah.
You don't have that same rainbow line from the 73, but it's sort of like here, just boom.
It's kind of like coming out of a little womb.
Oh, right there. Jeez.
Like green magenta.
It's almost like a Fantastic Four, you know, when Invisible Woman does her like effect thing, like holy shit. That's crazy. Ah, there it is. Look at that. Wow.
It's wild stuff. What I usually would want to do here is center frame. But if my film is never going to have anyone center framed, I wouldn't test center frame.
Right.
Because that's not a shot I'm going to take, right?
Yeah.
So I'd be like, well, they're probably going to be here, right?
Yeah.
So this is sort of like we want to just decide, like, is that, I'd say like this is probably the shot here.
Yeah.
We then moved outside to test out these lenses and their ability to render this Petzval effect. It's this swirliness that you'll see in a lot of vintage and older lenses in the out of focus areas. We tested it at T2.1 and 5.6, and you'll notice that there is varying degrees of swirliness. And again, you can exaggerate this depending on how much greenery or texture you have behind your subject. It's a fun thing to test out. It might not be applicable for all your storytelling needs, but it is good to know so that you can avoid it or include it in your subject and story. The last test was to bring all these elements together to see how they worked in tandem with each other. And when you had all of these things working together, it starts to give you a much deeper understanding of how these lenses can tell a story for you. It also gives you an idea of where there might be weaknesses for certain storytelling elements.
Where I would use these lenses are anywhere where I want to communicate sort of what I call a dream state or a dream moment. And that doesn't mean actually like, oh, we're trying to show someone dreaming right now. No, it's anything that is like just outside the field of real, right? Like, and that could be anywhere where you're just trying to communicate something special or otherworldly to an audience. And that could be something in space, that could be horror, that could be just an art film, that could be, you know, feelings of joy and happiness, that could be feelings of like disorientation. Because there's so many aberrations in this image that it really can obscure the image. And I think that's really wonderful. When you give an audience too much information, their imagination shuts down. And why this trend is going forward right now in a lot of different optics is because people are re-engaging with the value of cinema and imagination. And by throttling what the audience gets access to, they put themselves in the image and they put themselves in the story. And it's optics like that that do that. And what's really great about Leitz is that you have all the heritage of Leitz glass. So you do have an image that's actually really good in terms of, like, especially after a certain stop, really nice in terms of contrast, focus fall off, rendition, but they've really detuned it to make it feel like these are lenses from the 1930s. So you kind of get, from what I'm seeing in the test that we've done today, you really kind of get some of the best of both worlds.
As Dale mentioned, these tests, you can perform them at home or in your studio. It doesn't require a lot of supplies. And it's not necessarily about strict scientific accuracy, even though you could chase that. It's about gaining a deeper understanding of your paintbrushes to know how they perform so that you can best utilize them for the story that you're trying to tell. As you can tell from the results, all these lenses share the same design philosophy and some of the basic characteristics, but they do vary from one lens to the next in terms of how much character they provide. Now, if I had to pick just one lens, I believe it's the 50mm T2.1. I think it gives you the best of what this HEKTOR line represents and this beautiful character that you can use for motion and stills. If you're trying to pair this with one more lens, I'd recommend the 25 T2.1. I think these two make an incredible duo that you can tell incredible stories with. And if you're looking to complete the trio, my next recommendation would be the 100mm T2.1. Fabulous character, tough to handle, but just beautiful results, especially for photography. The 73 T2.1 is a strong alternative to the 100mm, trading a touch of flaring for greater flexibility in the field. The 35mm is the cleanest choice for those who prefer something that's noticeably tamer, and the 18mm, on the other hand, is full of character, especially in the way that it flares. Combined with the distortion of such a wide field of view, it may not be as popular as the others, but it brings a distinct sense of wonder and exposition to your frame. So who are these lenses for? Who is Leitz targeting? Well, let me first get the pricing out of the way because these are not to be considered a budget or affordable option. These are premium lenses that are designed and built in limited quantities in Wetzlar, Germany. These lenses, they start at about 5,500 euros each. And if you're looking for the complete set of 6, it's over 31,000 euros. So this is something that is a considerable investment for individuals. That being said, for rental houses and medium to large size production companies, these lenses with that Leitz badge are gonna feel like a bargain. The most important thing you'll need to decide is whether the look of these lenses will complement the stories you want to tell. Their wide open character, strong resolving power, and rich bokeh really lean into narrative fiction, music videos, and highly creative commercial work. At the same time, the amount of control they offer, especially when you stop down, make these HEKTOR lenses equally great for other environments such as interviews and documentary. The look, the feel, the design of these lenses are gonna be really attractive for these newer and more independent filmmakers where they're looking for something that can define their work without feeling like something that's gonna be a fad in a decade. And here's the thing, they have a significant advantage over these vintage rehousings because those are becoming more and more popular and used for big productions. They still suffer from two main issues, quality control and maintenance. For independent filmmakers, investing in vintage lenses is always a gamble. Quality can vary from one copy to the next, even within the same set. Maintenance is another headache, since the vendor who sells you the glass may not be around to support you years later. With Leitz, you get something different. A look that's consistent, a level of quality you'd expect from a German manufacturer, and the confidence that the support will be there when you need it. For medium to large productions, these lenses feel like they can hold their own and provide value for filmmakers who benefit from their look and prioritize smaller solutions in the field. Lastly, and this might sound surprising, but I believe a lot of Leica photographers will see what these lenses can do and add one or two to their kit. The look and feel is fantastic for stills. I've lost count the amount of times that I've reached for the 73 or the 100 to capture a portrait, and I keep going back to them. Priced on par with a premium SL lens, yet carrying the magic of a vintage M glass, the HEKTOR series offers this rare bridge between two worlds. I know some of you, and maybe even a good amount of you, think I'm way off base here, where we're talking about a lens that can work equally great for motion and stills, but I don't think time is gonna prove me wrong. After using these lenses all over the world, I'm talking about in the rains of Greenland to the comforts of a Toronto studio to the hills of Hollywood, and talking to a bunch of industry professionals, I believe that Leitz, they've created something really special. Something that I think is going to draw a lot more interest and might end up being their most popular lens in their entire catalog. And if you're asking me, I think it's going to be back ordered for months to come.